Say, what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down! Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I ended up serving 24 years straight in the California prison system. During those times, I accumulated some good stories and some insight on things related to prison, and I'm going to share some with y'all today. If you like the video, hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment, and most importantly, hit that notification bell. That way, anytime I drop a story, you will be notified ASAP, and you can hop on it whenever you're ready. That being said, let's hop right up into this story right here. So actually, I'm going to give y'all a couple stories about two different incidents when we had standoffs with the Southsiders. Now, for the whole 24 years I was locked up, I never was involved in a riot, in an actual riot with the Southsiders. You know, now looking back on it, that definitely was a good thing because, you know, anything can happen. You know, the other day I told you guys a little, I spoke on an incident where two people that got killed trying to stab another dude and stuff like that, man, just makes me think about, you know, how fortunate that I was because, you know, when you out there, you in a riot, things that's going on, man, you got the gunners in the tower, they got mini 14 rifles, you know, and they looking to shoot and kill and stop people from rioting. And so, like I say, it's definitely fortunate, you know. So anyway, the first incident that I'm gonna talk about happened in a prison by the name of Ironwood, Blythe. Ironwood is in the city of Blythe, excuse me, and this happened probably, I would like to say, maybe somewhere around 99, 2000. It was on B Yard. So I learned all this a little bit later on, the particulars that created the standoff. So what happened was, okay, so a little after breakfast is normally served somewhere around maybe 6:30, 7 o'clock. I believe Ironwood had 5 different yards, and so, 5 different buildings on each yard, and so they were released like maybe say building 1. I think each building may have had maybe about 400 people up in each building because it was bottom tier, top tier, and so they were, you know, called building 1 release for Chow, building 2 or whatever. So in the releasing of these buildings, I believe it was a dude, and I'm not 100% sure about this. I believe it was a black dude by the name of TJ. And I can't remember if he was working in the kitchen or he was the one going to get his tray. So when you get released from the building, they let you out, you walk around a long track, then you come into the you come into the cafeteria, the chow hall. So when you come into the chow hall, you turn left, then you walk. They have like it's like a straight line that you walk in where you're next to a wall and like a little rail. The rail is maybe about a little lower than waist high. And then on the other side of that rail is a whole bunch of like cafeteria seats, little metal tables and chairs that seat 4 people. So you walk along that thing, then you turn to the right. And then once you turn to the right, you walk down maybe another 15, 20 steps. And then they have a little slot that's waist high, and the cafeteria workers or the chow hall workers are on the other side of that, you know, preparing the trays and all that, and then they'll slide the tray out that slot. So I can't remember if the dude TJ was working in the kitchen. I think he was working in the kitchen, or if he was picking up his tray. So anyway, the tray gets slid out of that slot for whatever reason. I believe it was a Hispanic dude getting the tray, and for whatever reason he had some type of problem with the tray, and there was a little discussion. So then he slid the tray back in. Maybe, okay, now the trays have these compartments, 4 little compartments. You know, each compartment holds a little bit of the food. Now, back in those days, too, people was real respectful. The people who was making the trays, you know, because you never know who's gonna get that tray. And if you're working inside the cafeteria, the kitchen, the chow hall, you have homeboys as well coming to get your food, people from your race and other people. So you definitely want to be respectful of how you, when you're back there, it's like a line, like in the line behind the in the kitchen, the people that's creating the food. So you may have a person, he may be on beans. So each time a tray comes by, he puts a scoop of beans on there. Then you may have another person, he might be on oatmeal each time. So that's the only thing he does is he just scoops the oatmeal. And so, you definitely want to try not to mix the oatmeal with the beans, put the oatmeal where the rice is supposed to go, or the oatmeal on top of the eggs, stuff like that. So I don't remember what the discrepancy was about, but for whatever reason, the tray that got slid out of the window slid back in the window. So when it came back in, there was a few words. The tray got slid back out, and like I say, this was between a black dude and a Hispanic. Now, if it was TJ, TJ was TJ was a non-affiliate. He was a black dude. I think he was from another state, and it came out here or something and got caught up or whatever. So just that little altercation right there, of course, made it back to all the buildings. So now, before we get ready to go out to yard, you got kitchen workers returning from work, and so some type of way the word was passed, hey man, such and such got into it today with a Southsider in the kitchen. So when you come outside, be ready, man, because it might go down, So when we come outside to yard, when they finally do release yard, and one thing about any California prison, you always will know when there's tension, because when you hit the yard, you can feel it. The vibe is totally different. It's extremely quiet. Anytime there's not a lot of people making noise or a lot of talking, hollering, people doing their normal activities, that's a telltale sign that something is in the air, and so all the brothers is pretty much going around, telling their homeboys and making sure everybody knew that, hey man, something happened off in the kitchen today. So we hit a couple laps. Now, all the Southsiders are over there on their side of the handball court and in the grass, basically. They all just over there, kind of like squatted down, just chilling and doing their thing, And so you got a lot of brothers, you got a lot of brothers here and there, At that time, a lot of people are sticking with their respective cars. So, you may have had the Comptons all over here. You may have had, the dudes from Hoover over here, the neighborhood car or whatever, And so I remember, so I'm hitting a couple laps, I believe. And there was a dude by the name of J-Rock. J-Rock was from Playboy Gangsters, real cool dude. Me and him had a rapport. So he was going down to talk to somebody who was speaking for the Southsiders to try to get this situation resolved. So he was walking toward a couple of them. I see him walking by himself, even though, you had dudes up against the wall, but he was kind of like going down there. So I started walking with him. So we walked down there. Now, when he's starting to approach whoever he's getting ready to talk to, I stood back maybe 4 or 5 feet because I don't want to make it seem like we pushing up on these dudes or we pushing up on this one dude when the one dude was coming to meet him. So I'm just standing there with him, in the event something happens. He's just not right there by himself, So they talked for a little while, and then he came back. So when he came back, he let me know that, they had basically pretty much resolved the situation. They had just agreed to just let the situation go because there was no punches or none of that being thrown. Just a couple, hey man, what's up with this trade? For whatever reason it was. So, they go back to their people. We went back to our people and let them know everything was supposed to be squashed. But just something that small could have potentially set off a deadly riot. Just the simple of the mistake of someone sliding the tray out too fast or maybe putting the beans with the rice. Like I say, I don't remember what the exact incident was that made everybody, come outside prepared like that, The next incident, though, took place at a level 2. I was at Corcoran. I was at SADF. And so SADF, the difference between SADF is it's dorm living as opposed to cell living. So when you come in, depending on how that particular prison may be set up, you'll have a lot of different cubicles with pods in them and stuff. So this particular building was set up. It had three big giant day rooms. And then, they also had each particular pod had a day room, but then it also had, a bed space area where they had bunk beds and stuff like that. And so, now during the day, you could go to any, you could go in and out, because it had A, B, and C. And it went around. And then at night, they had these big old giant gates. They would call them grill gates. And they would, at night, maybe like 10 o'clock, you had to lock up in your respective side. And then we still could watch TV for a while, but then at a certain time, like 11, I believe, we had to go in our bunks. Now, the pod that I was in, if I remember, it may have had 3 or 4 different cubicles inside that one big old giant building, and where it contained bunk beds and stuff. And so now the problem was this here. So by it being like dorm type living and there's no sales, you can't get no peace and quiet. We had what was known as a quiet time, which was agreed between all the races. I believe it was from 10 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, or it may have been 11 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. And so during that quiet time, you're supposed to have your voice down, no loud music unless it was with your headphones and stuff. And, so other people could sleep because in this type of environment, we have to keep in mind, well, a lot of you guys may not know, people have jobs to get up and go to in the morning. They have education to get up to go to in the morning. They have trades and things they're trying to do. So if people is up screaming and hollering all night, you can't get no sleep. And like I said, since you're not in a cell, you don't have that luxury of being away from people. That was the whole reason that the quiet time was imposed. And so in the midst of these big giant dorms and pods, there are a bunch of different races. Like, so right next to me, my neighbor was a Southsider. They'll house you on the bunk with someone of your race, but your next door neighbor could be a Southsider, a white, or whatever, Paisa, Asian. And so my next door neighbor was a Southsider. I remember this dude was definitely much bigger than the average Southsider, man. This dude was pretty big. I would say he was probably about 5'9", 5'10", maybe about 230 pounds, maybe 225. You could definitely tell he had worked out, was a little chunky, but he still had a good size on him. And not all of them, but this just particular dude, man, I got the feeling that he thought he was hard and he really didn't like blacks. That's just what that's the vibe I got from it. You know what I'm saying? And so he was my next door neighbor. And so on this particular night, the Southsiders earlier that night around 8 or 9, they had a big old giant spread. They had a spread. They had some alcohol over there. So they doing their thing. It was basically all of it that was on that side. Now there was another dude that ran with him, which was kind of rare. This other dude who ran with him, he was a Samoan. Now in most cases, the Samoans run with the Asian card. But this Samoan, for whatever reason, I guess a reason of his choosing, he chose to run with the Southsiders. And this dude, he was big. Most Samoans that I've ran across in prison are big. He was probably 6'2", 6'3", maybe 250, 260, big old giant dude. And so now, like I said, so they're having a spread. Now, so when 11 o'clock came, they continued, to have, because so a spread, of course, is a whole bunch of different food, cooked up beans, rice, maybe tortillas and burritos, whatever a person decides to make. And so, they was all grouped up, hanging around one bunk area, making burritos, chilling, eating, talking and stuff like that. So once it got time to 11 o'clock, they're still over there doing their things. Maybe 11:15, 11:30. They still over there laughing. They talking loud, and stuff like that. So somebody that was black took offense to what they was doing because they wasn't respecting the quiet time. So they got up. They went and approached them. They was basically like, hey, man, we having a spread. We doing what we doing, pretty much. So you had a few dudes who didn't like it. So they started talking to the black like, hey, man, these dudes is over here tripping. So all the blacks got up. And so now we started going over there, right? And this is the horrible part, in my opinion, about being in dorm living, because that's the bad thing about being in a dorm. There's no privacy. It's anything could happen, and so when this shit jumped off, I don't know how many blacks was able to be notified because something was brewing, you know what I'm saying? So dudes is getting up. I'd only been at this level 2, maybe about a month. So I'm uncomfortable anyway with just everybody walking past me, you know, at night. You got to sleep. You sleeping out there. It's no privacy. So I hadn't took yet to even taking my shoes off. I'm sleeping in my boots or my tennis shoes because also the bunk that I was on, something in my damn mouth. The bunk that I was on was a bunk bed. I'm on the top. So if something happened to jump off in the middle of the night, I would have been barefooted if I'm not sleeping with my shoes on. So I'm sleeping with my shoes on. And so, like I said, this stuff is happening now. Everybody's starting to, everybody's starting to basically just have this big old standoff right there. So, the guard, they have this little office that they sit in that faces all the sections and stuff in the dorms. So he's right there. So he's looking, he sees it. So then he turns the light on, tell everybody to go back to their bunk, all that old type of stuff. Now, the bad part too also about it is, even though we're on this side of the dorm, you best believe that if something that had kicked off and people start fighting, it's gonna carry to, we may have been an A side, it's gonna carry the B side, and it's gonna carry the C side, because it's all right there, even though they got the grill gate, and so a person from B side won't be able to get in C side. But like I said, if the Hispanics and the blacks get into it, it's gonna carry over. Now the bad part about it, if you were in B side or you were in C side, maybe when all this stuff is brewing, you might be over there in the bed asleep. So you're not even knowing that it's a potential riot about to happen. And that's the bad part about it. You can get caught in your sleep, unprepared. You liable to get stabbed and this and that. Because even though this was a level 2, I had told y'all in the story earlier, I had seen some extremely vicious knives here, man. We had a dude, he was a Crip by the name of Kabu. He was paralyzed and he was in a wheelchair. I believe Kabu was like a Samoan or something like that, but he was from 60s. And so he was paralyzed and in a wheelchair. Now his job, he worked in a trade that was behind the wall. So he was in a wheelchair. Now, when you go behind the wall, you have to pass through a metal detector. Due to the fact of him being paralyzed, every time he go through the metal detector, it's just going to go off. So, of course, when they see him coming, the guards, they just let him roll on through. So he was back there working in an area where they had welding. So they was making these knives. Some of the brothers back there, some Crips or whoever, was making these knives, extremely big, heavy, long, and sharp. And so they'd give them to him. He'd sit on them and just go through he'd go through work exchange is what it was called, and go through the metal detectors. And of course, he was never detected because he's in a wheelchair. And so, like I said, they had a bunch of these, the brothers floating around. So I'm knowing that even though this is a level 2, this is still prison, and things still can get extremely dangerous or whatever. And so, the police, they get wind of what's going on. They tell everybody to go back to their bunks and stuff. So they make a call, of course. Then maybe about a minute or two, a whole bunch of guards come up in there. They screaming and hollering, tell everybody to get on their bunk or whatever. They got the lights on. Now they're walking through, telling everybody to get on their bunk. They see a few people with their shoes on, start telling people, take your shoes off, take your shoes off. So now, a lot of these dudes is compliant, and at a level 2, you have a lot of dudes that don't have a whole lot of time, and it's a lower security level than a level 3 and a level 4. You have a lot of dudes that might be doing a couple of years, maybe a month or 2 left of the house or whatever. It's not, they did have some lifers there, but it's not a whole lot. But you have a lot of people that's more likely to comply. So of course, a lot of people started taking their shoes off. When they got to me, I told them I'm not taking my shoes off. There ain't no rule in the Title 15. The Title 15 is a book that governs. It's a book of rules that governs not only the inmates or prisoners, but it also governs the guards. And speaks on things that they have to do and stuff like that. So the police is getting at me, man, telling me, hey, take your shoes off on the basis of me having my shoes on is potentially inciting a riot. I guess it's making people uneasy. I tell them I'm not taking my shoes off or whatever. So we go through this for a minute. They tell me to stand up. They handcuff me, take me outside. Now at this, like I say, it's nighttime. So they take me outside and put me up against the wall. Or you know what? I don't know if they handcuffed me, but they definitely escorted me and took me outside, put me up against the wall. So the dude is telling me, hey, man, you need to take your damn shoes off. We're going to send you to the hole or whatever. I tell him, hey, man, listen, I got life. Now, at this time, it's like 2004. I said, I got life. I'm not never going nowhere, anywhere. I don't give a hell about none of that, you know. Send me to the hole or whatever. So in the midst of them, you know, talking to me, trying to spook me and being up in my face, I happened to notice they bring my next door neighbor out. My next door neighbor was the big Southsider dude that I was telling you guys about. So they bring him out, maybe put him on the wall, maybe about 3 or 4 feet right down from me, put him on the wall right on to my right, you know, and I don't know what they was tripping with him about. I don't know if it was about the shoes or whatever, but they got him up against the wall. Now, I told y'all earlier, a couple of days ago in the story, this is just the way I perceived it. The guards at that prison, Corcoran, a lot of them seemed like they were more, they had, some of them seemed like they had problems with the Southsiders. Corcoran is kind of like, maybe, I don't know if you would call it almost Central California or almost on the dividing line of what's considered Northerner territory. So a lot of those dudes seem like they sympathize with the Northerners, even though it wasn't any Northerners on that particular yard, but they had Northerners on this other yard. So a lot of them seemed like they was, you know, hostile toward the Southsiders. And so they had, now while this dude is on the wall, he's got about 4 or 5 COs around him. You know, they screaming at him, hollering at him. I forget what the problem was, but all of a sudden he turned around. He turned around and, like, you know, squared up like he was ready to fight, like he wasn't going for this or whatever. You know, they said something to him he didn't like. He turned around and squared up. Soon as he turned around and squared up, one of the police maced him. Shh, it's like the sergeant or somebody. He started talking crazy to him. Hey, motherfucker, don't you ever take a step and square up towards me, motherfucker. What's wrong with you? So now when they maced him, the dude started hollering. He fell on the ground. You know, I can't see. So now one of the sergeants starts saying, look at you now, tough guy, look at you now. You know, so then they grabbed him, snatched him up, took him off to the hole. So now they back on me. They telling me, we need you to take your shoes off. I say, hey man, listen, there ain't no rules in the Title 15 that say I can't sleep with my shoes on, man. And so the sergeant come over to tell me that, by me having my shoes on, it's making people nervous and blah, blah, blah. I tell him, hey, man, listen, I'm a lifer. I just got here. I'm not used to this type of stuff. I said, what I can do for you, I can get in the bed. I can get up under my blanket. You know what I'm saying? That way a person won't see my boots on or my tennis shoes or whatever I had on. And but other than that, man, there's no way you can make me do something that I feel is jeopardizing my safety or whatever. I feel that, it's a necessity for me to have my boots on. So he was cool with that. And they walked me back to the building eventually. Maybe about 2 months later, my next door neighbor, that Southsider dude that they had maced, they brought him back. And by this time I was living in another section. Then I don't know, maybe about a month later, after they brought him back, I end up being charged with stabbing somebody, and I went to the hole. If you haven't seen that story, the name of that story is Chill versus Goliath. So definitely be sure to look that up. And so, like I said, man, these instances can get crazy, man. Just simply because people was talking loud and wasn't respecting the curfew time, the quiet time, and so you never know being in prison how things is gonna turn out. Like I said, a lot of times it's extreme small issues that always blow up into big issues, due a lot of times to the lack of conflict resolution skills, the lack of communication, the lack of knowing how to communicate in a way that's not gonna seem you trying to basically make a dude seem smaller or less than you. You know what I'm saying? And so, fortunately though, none of those situations got out of control, because in the event that a riot does jump off anywhere, but especially in the dorms, first thing that the COs up in there is going to do, pew, boom, they getting up out of there. They supposed to get on the mic, talk about riot, and they running up out of there. They running outside. They locking everybody that's in the riot on the inside until they can get more backup, more of their co-workers come and respond. So you could be in there fighting 10, 15 minutes, possibly longer. You could be in there fighting for 4 or 5 minutes. But when you have 500, 600 dudes fighting, you know, up in there in a situation like that where it's a whole bunch of metal, you know, people throwing stuff, they got knives and stuff up in there, it definitely can get ugly and wicked, man. So anyway, you already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to Life, giving you a little story about a couple of standoffs that I was involved in. Resume normal program.